Today's daf is Nun Dalid in Yoma. We're going to start at the Gemara, bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Bet, right after the Mishnah, which described in detail the next steps of the Avodat Yom Kippurim. So the Gemara says, Mishenignaz lo katani ela mishenital. That the Mishnah specifically says, when the Aron was taken, in other words, when the Aron was taken away, they changed the procedure that they used the rock, the Even Shetiyah, instead of the Aron as the focal point of the service in the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So it says specifically when it was taken, not Mishenignaz. Mishenignaz means when they hid it away. From the time it hid it away, but from the time it was taken implies that it was captured, it wasn't hidden away. So the Gemara comments on this, Tenan Keman de Amar, this Mishnah supports then the one that says Aron Gala le Bavel, that actually the Aron was not hidden somewhere in Israel, but it was exiled to Babylonia. Titania, as we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Aron Gala le Bavel Shneimar, Ulechuvat Shana Shalach Hamelech Nebuchadnezzar Vayvi'eu Bavela Im Keleh Hamdat Bet Hashem. That it says that at the end of the year, Nebuchadnezzar the king brought everything from Bavel with the Keleh Chemdat Bet Hashem, the finest kelim, the finest vessels of the house of Hashem. So what's the implication? Rashi says, what does it mean, Im Keleh Chemdat? He says, Hu Aron. This is a reference to the Aron. Of course, what is the most desirable, most beautiful item in the Beit HaMikdash? And it says that Nebuchadnezzar took that. So that's a proof, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that Nebuchadnezzar, in fact, took the Aron. He took the all of the Keleh Chemdat Bet Hashem, all of the finest items in the Beit HaMikdash. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer Aron Gala leBavel. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai agrees with that actually the Aron went to Bavel, and it was not hidden in Israel. And he quotes a pasuk here, and the pasuk says, Lo yivater davar amar Hashem, that nothing will be left over, says Hashem. Okay. Elo aseret hadiberot shebo. Why does it say a thing, davar, won't be left over? Because it's talking about the aseret hadiberot, the 10 commandments. What are the aseret hadiberot? That is what's written on the luchot. And where are the luchot? In the Aron. So meaning, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that Nebuchadnezzar took the 10 commandments, meaning he took the Aron as well as other items in the Beit HaMikdash. Rabbi Yehuda, and let's see what it should say on the side, according to the note here. It should say Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, according to what it says on the side, not Ben Lakish, according to the Yerushalmi. Actually, he gives a couple of different versions. He says some people just erase the name, some people have Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, some people have Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Ilai. Okay, says Aron bimkomo nignaz. Actually, the Aron was hidden in its own place, meaning under the ground of the Beit HaMikdash area. Shneimar, as it says, Vayera'u habadim. Okay, it says that the Rashi Abadim, rather, that the staves, the sticks that were on the Aron were seen min hakodesh al panei hadivir, from the kodesh upon the face of the divir. The divir is what divides the kodesh from the kodesh HaKodeshim. Ve'lo yar'u achutza, but they could not be seen outside. Vayu sham ad hayom hazeh, and they were there until this very day. Okay, we're going to see later a discussion of this pasuk exactly what it means that they were seen but they weren't seen. First it says they were seen, then it says they weren't seen. So which one is true? It's going to talk about that later. But the point is that it says that they were there ad hayom hazeh, they were there until today, meaning that they never left. Okay, upliga the ula, and this is a disagreement with ula. That's one opinion, but now they're giving other views. That opinion was mentioned before. Now we're going into some other ones. So Upliga de Ulan. Ula disagrees with this. The Amar Ula, because Ula says Sha'al Rabbi Matya ben Charash at Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. He said that Rabbi Matya ben Charash asked Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Biromi in Rome. Rabbi Eliezer Melamadina Pam Rishona Ushniha Aron Galal Bavel Rishona Had Amaran Vayvio Bavela Im Klei Hamdat Bet Hashem. That the first, that there are two sources Rabbi Eliezer gave us to tell us that the Aron went into Bavel, that it was exiled to Bavel. The first one is that it says Vayvio Bavela Im Klei Hamdat Bet Hashem, that he brought him to Bavel with all of the finest items of the Beit HaMikdash. Sheniya Maihi. What is the second source to show us that in fact the Aron was sent into exile into Bavel? Vayetzeh mibat Tzion kol hadara, because it says that all of the glory of Tzion left. That's from Echa. that we read on Tisha B'Av. Mai kol hadara, what does it mean? All of its glory. Hadara, all of the inner secret things. In other words, as Rashi says, haganuz b'hadre hadarim, the things that are hidden in the innermost chamber. Okay, the things that are hidden away, meaning the Aron, which is in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, was taken as well. As we turn to Daf Nun Dalet Amud Aleph. Okay, so Ata Ma'ata Omer, or maybe it should say Ma'ata Omer. So what do you say? He asked Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So he said, Amar lo, Shani Omer, Aron bimkomo ganuz. He said, I say that the Aron was hidden in its own place, meaning that it was not sent out into exile together with the other items that were found in the Beit HaMikdash. So he asked. So according to this version, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is not agreeing that it went to Bavel, but he's actually saying that it was hidden in its own place. Okay. And he quotes the pasuk that says that the badim, that the staves of the Aron were extended, and were there ad hayom hazeh, until this very day. Meaning to say, until this very day means that they were, that it never left. In other words, it never left the precincts of the Beit HaMikdash. It's still there somewhere. Amar le Rabba le'ula, Rabba said to Ula, Mai mashma, what dichtiv vayusham ad hayom hazeh? Are you telling me that the fact that the pasuk says that the Aron is going to be there ad hayom hazeh, until this very day, means forever? Is it true that every time it says the words until this day, it means forever? It could just mean until the day that this was written, right? Until the day that this text was written. It doesn't mean until the day forever. But it says in the pasuk, "Vayevusi Yoshev Yerushalayim lo harishu bnei Binyamin, vayesh vayevusi et bnei Binyamin beYerushalayim ad hayom hazeh." It says that the bnei Binyamin did not drive out the Yevusim from their territory, and therefore the bnei Binyamin lived in Jerusalem with the Yevusi ad hayom hazeh, until this very day. Are you telling me that the Binyamin, they never were exiled out of Yerushalayim? They still live there now? Is that true? Obviously not. Okay, and according to you, are you telling me that the tribe of Binyamin was never exiled? But Rabbi Yehuda said that for 52 years, not one person ever passed through Judah. In other words, didn't pass through any of the southern kingdom of Israel. As it says, this is the Haftarah of Tisha B'Av morning, right? On the mountains I will raise up cry and lament, and over the pastures of the Midbar, okay, I will raise a lament, because it's been destroyed without anybody passing by, and there's no sound of cattle, from the birds of the heaven and until the animals, they've wandered, they've gone, and behema begematria 52 havu, and the word behema, the gematria is 52. So we learn from this that how long was it empty that way, that not a person passed by, that there was not a sound of an animal, not a sound of a person in all of Israel? 52 years.
This is between first and second, right?
After the destruction of the first, right? Because this is written by Yirmiyahu. So Vetanya we learned that Rabbi Yossi Omer Sheva Shanim Nitzkaima Gofrit Vamelach Beretz Yisrael, that there were 7 years that the entire land of Israel was covered by sulfur and salt. Gofrit Vamelach. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan says, "My tamad Rabbi Yossi." And where did Rabbi Yossi get this from? Atya Berit Berit, because there's a Gezerah Shavat, 2 Pesukim. They use the word covenant, Berit, Ketiv Hacha. It says over here, and this pasuk is found in Daniel, I believe. Yeah, in Daniel, V'Higbir Berit LaRabim Shavua Ehad. Okay, and there was a Berit Shavua Ehad. For 1 week, which means here 7 years. Shavua here doesn't mean Shavua of days, it means for 7 years. Okay? There was a strong berit for 7 years. Uchtiv hatam, and it says over there, Ve'amaru ala she'azvu et berit Hashem Elohei avotam. It says and this is actually found in the Torah in Parashat Nitzavim, that when the people will see, right, Gofrit Vamelach, Sarefa Kol Arza, they will see that the entire land is burnt. Gofrit Vamelach, there's sulfur and there's salt, right, everywhere covering the land. And they will say, why did this happen? And they'll say, Alasher Azivu et Berit Hashem Elohei Avotam, because they left the covenant that they had. So what do you see? The word Berit is a reference to the salt and the sulfur covering the land. And it says the berit was 7 years. So that means for 7 years there was sulfur and salt covering the land. In other words, there was no inhabitants for 7 years, and the other pasuk told us 52 years there was nobody who even passed through. So there were no inhabitants. So how could you say, so what is this purpose of bringing this? To show you, if there was a minimum 7 years that there was nobody there, 52 years according to the other pasuk there was nobody passing through, and you're telling me that the Bnei Binyamin, it says that they lived there forever, ad hayom hazeh, that means forever. How could it be forever? There was a significant period of time that there was nobody there. So it definitely doesn't mean forever. So you can't tell me that whenever it says ad hayom hazeh it means forever. Okay, so therefore what is the answer? Amar le, he said to him, hachak ketiv sham. Hatam lo ketiv sham. There it says sham. There, that when it describes the Aron, it says it was there. It was sham. It was there. Ad hayom hazeh. Okay, vayihu sham ad hayom hazeh. But in the case of the Bnei Binyamin, it doesn't say the word sham. That they were there in that very place until today. So now you're going to tell me that anytime it says something is there until today, it means forever. Right? That's what you're saying. So you're saying Bnei Binyamin, they weren't there forever because it doesn't say Sham. It doesn't say they were there. It just says they lived until Ad Hayom Hazeh. But it doesn't say they were there until Hayom Hazeh. So now you're going to tell me that Sham is the key thing. Okay, Sham. So let's see. Maybe will raise an objection. This is from Divrei Yamim. There were some members of the tribe of Shimon that went to Mount Seir. Anashim Hamesh Me'ot. There were 500 people. Uplatya, Unarya. These are the names of the heads of the families. Urefaya, Va'uziel, Bnei Yish'i Berosham. These are the, and it says, Vayakut Sherit HaPeleta La'amalek, Vayeshevu Sham Ad Hayom Hazeh. It says that they knocked out whatever was left over of Amalek, and they lived there until today. But what does it say? Vayihyu, Vayeshevu Sham. Sham. What does Sham mean? Now, according to you, whenever it says Sham Ad Hayom Hazeh, that means they were there in that very place forever. So let's see if that's correct. So according to you, were they there forever? Is that what you're telling me they were there forever? But wait a second. But we know that Sancheriv, the king of Ashur, came and he messed up all the countries. In other words, he moved everybody around. It says that I removed the boundaries of the peoples and I plundered all of their treasures. In other words, how could you tell me that these people, these Bnei Shimon, are still living in Har Seir? They're definitely not living in Har Seir, because from the time of Sancheriv, everything was mixed up and messed up. So obviously Sham Ad Hayom Hazeh also doesn't mean that they were there forever.
Continuous.
Just means until whenever this was written. So what does the Gemara say? Tiyuvta. You're right. Sham Ad Hayom Hazeh doesn't mean anything. So therefore the fact that it says in the pasuk that the Aron was Sham Ad Hayom Hazeh is not a good proof that it's still there. Amar Rav Nachman says Tana. We learned in a Tosefta, the Chachamim say, Aron b'deshkat dir ha'etzim hayaganus, that actually the Aron was hidden underneath the dir ha'etzim, underneath the chamber of wood. Okay, now some say that this is referring to the same thing as it being in the Aron, as it being in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, meaning that there was some kind of passageway from the Dir HaEtzim, from the wood chamber, to go down underneath the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Or it could be that this is a variation. In other words, one view says that it was in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, by Yehu Sham, that it stayed there. Some say that no, it was actually underneath the Dir HaEtzim, so it's still on the property of the Beit HaMikdash, but in a different area.
A Persian sorcerer that was named after him?
Remember that? No, that was the Parhedrin. Right. Yeah, that was the other place. Okay, so now Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Afanan Nami Tanina. We also learned in a Mishnah, in fact, we learned this in Masechet Shekalim. Right? It was in Masechet Shekalim. What does it say? That one time there was a certain Kohen who was busy, and he noticed that there was one tile in the floor that was out of place. Remember this? And he went to tell his friend, and he wasn't able to tell him what it was until he died. And they knew for sure that was the place where the Aron must be hidden, and that's why he died before he was able to reveal it. What was he doing there? It says mitasek, he was involved. What was he involved in? Amar Rabbi Chail says mitasek b'kardumoya. He was playing around with his axe. In other words, what is the point here? Why does it mention this? So it doesn't say why, and so Rashi says b'tiul v'schok. He was just playing around. He wasn't working. That's why I noticed it. Okay, so And Rashi says, what does it mean that one of the tiles was different? It was a little bit higher than the other one. So he could tell that it had been taken out and put back in to hide something under there, right? Because you could see that it had been displaced and then put back so it wasn't even. So what's the question? So why does it have to mention that he was mitasek b'kartam, he was playing around? So I'd suggest, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that the reason why is because it's trying to say if he had been involved in the mitzvah, this wouldn't have happened to him. But he was fooling around, and that's why it happened to him. Tanad Rabbi Ishmael's yeshiva taught the following. This is a similar type of story. There were two kohanim who were matle'in. They were ba'alei mumin. So what did they do with the ba'alei mumin? The people who couldn't serve in the Beit HaMikdash, they put them to do the dirty work, right? So what did they have to do? They had to remove the wood that was wormy, because you can't use wormy wood on the mizbeach. So their job was to get rid of the wormy wood. And one of them, their axe came loose, and it fell over by the same area, and fire came out and consumed the axe. So they knew, hey, there's something going on here. In other words, wherever it fell must have been he would have discovered that secret spot. Now, but what do you notice about the story? In this story, the Kohen doesn't get burnt, only his axe gets burnt. Because why? He was actually working. Right? He was actually working. So the point was that he would have discovered where the tile was if his axe had fallen and, in the area.
You're not supposed to use barzel.
To build the Beit HaMikdash, but to cut the wood, they did. Yeah, because they also slaughtered with metal. So, but the point is that here he didn't get consumed by the fire. Only the axe did. But the point was so that it shouldn't reveal where it was going to fall. Was going to reveal that displaced tile. Rav Yehuda showed a contradiction, and we saw it before. In the same pasuk, it says that the staves, the sticks of the Aron, were seen. And then it says that they weren't seen. In the same pasuk, it says they weren't seen. So were they seen or not? How could this be near in ve'in near in? They were seen and not seen. Okay, that doesn't help us. What does that mean? Tanya nami hachi, we learned in a braita. So it says that the staves of the Aron could be seen. Now you might think that they can't move. In other words, that we know that you're not allowed to remove, right? You're not allowed to ever remove the sticks, right, the staves out of the Aron. So you might think that they can't be moved. Talmud Omar, the pasuk says, "Vayarichu abadim." No, it says they extended them, meaning that what they did was they left them in place, but they pulled them forward so that they would stick out through the curtain of the Kodesh HaKodashim. They would stick out. Okay? So, but still, maybe that means that they should penetrate through the parochet, through the curtain, and come out. No, they're not going to be seen outside. So what does that mean then? What it means is that what they did was they pulled the staves of the Aron, they left them in the rings. They have to stay in the rings, but they pulled them forward so that they're pushing up against the parochet, but not penetrating through. So they look like the chest of a woman penetrating through. That's like the shirt. It looks like the bosom of a woman. That's what it looked like. Why? Shene'emar, Tzerora mordodili, my beloved is like a container of spices, right? Tzerora, a bundle of spices. Ben Shaddai Yalin, between my breasts he rests. Okay? So too, the Shekhinah, the divine presence is between what looks like a woman's breasts. That's the way that they set it up. Now nowadays people would say, well, that's very risque, that's not appropriate and everything, but they didn't have those issues. They didn't have the Christian hang-up about sexuality that we have today. Amar Rav Katina said, B'sha'ah shahayu Yisrael Olin Regel, when the Jews would go up for Aliyah Regel, they would go up to visit the Beit HaMikdash every year. So what did they do? Megalalin lahem et parochet. They would roll back the parochet, the curtain. Umarin lahem et kirovim. They would show them the kirovim. Meaning, now we're assuming right now that it means the ones on top of the ark, right? The golden ones. Shayu me'orin ze bazeh. They were hugging each other. Omrim lahem, and they would say, Re'u chibatchem lefnei hamakom chibat zacharun keva. Look at how beloved you are to Hashem, like the love between a man and a woman. And of course, there's a lot of Kabbalah, and a lot of Midrashim based on this analogy, and a lot of statements of the Nevi'im based on this idea of the love of a man and a woman, and the marriage between the Jewish people and Hashem. Mativ Rav Chisda raised an objection here. It says in the Torah that the Levi'im are not allowed to see you put away the Kalei Mikdash, right? It says that Aaron uvanav yavo'u, Aaron and his sons have to come, and they have to cover everything before the Levi'im carry it. Why not? Because the Levi'im are not supposed to look upon all of the vessels, right? That's what it says. They're not supposed to look. So if that's the case, Rav Yehuda said that Rav said that this means that they're not supposed to watch when the Kohanim place everything in its container, in its covering to be carried. They're not allowed to feast their eyes on it. So if that's the case, how now can we allow the people to look at the Aron? You're going to pull back the curtain and let everybody look at the Aron? How could you do that? Amar Rav Nachman, mashal lakala. It's like a bride. As long as she's in the house of her father, she's very modest around her husband. But as soon as she comes to the house of her father-in-law, meaning as soon as she's married, and she has a father-in-law, now she doesn't have to be as modest around her husband. She can be a little bit more relaxed. And so too, when the Jews were still in their early time, they had in the Midbar, they still didn't feel. Rashi says, Be'eruseha, during the betrothal, they didn't feel at home with the divine presence. They still felt uncomfortable, unfamiliar with it, until they became situated in Eretz Yisrael. So in the Midbar, they had to be more careful. They had to be more tsanua, so to speak, more modest. Hashem, so to speak. The Mishkan was more modest, like a woman would be modest around her fiancé more than around her husband, right? However, once there was a marriage, once you have the Bet HaMikdash, once the Jews feel comfortable in their connection with God, now more can be revealed. We can roll back the parochet and show the Aron. Mativ Rav Chana bar Rav Katina. Rav Chana bar Rav Katina raised an objection, and he said, we just read the story before, that the Kohen who noticed the tile that was displaced went to look at it, and what happened to him? He dropped dead. Why did he drop dead? Because he was going to reveal it. Why do we care if he's going to reveal it? Because they're going to look at it. So obviously they can't look at it. They're not supposed to look at the Aron. So the answer to the Gemara. So how can you tell me that they rolled back the parochet to show the Aron to everybody? So Amar le nitgaresha amrat. You're talking about nitgaresha after the divorce. Nidgaresha chazru lechibata harishona. After the divorce, meaning that was in the second Bet HaMikdash. There was a divorce already. Hashem already sent them into exile. They came back. After there's a divorce, you never feel as comfortable as the first time, right? After there's a breakup, you can't go back so easily. So it went back to the early way that we don't look at it anymore. Okay? So b'mayaskinan.
But according to Judaism, I mean, not symbolically, if a man divorces his wife, he can't remarry it again, right?
A Kohen can't, but a regular Jew can, as long as she doesn't marry anybody in between. Okay, a Kohen cannot. Now, this whole story that you're telling me that they rolled back the parochet and showed the Aron, which Bet HaMikdash are we talking about? Okay, because if you're going to tell me we're talking about the Bet HaMikdash, the first one, mihavai parochet. Was there actually a parochet? Didn't we say that actually there were doors? Remember, there was not a parochet. We learned that before. Rather, we're talking about in the second Beit HaMikdash, but mihavu kiruvim. But in the second Beit HaMikdash, there was no Aron. So what were they showing then? So either way you're stuck. Le'olam b'mikdash rishon. So let's say that really it was in the first Beit HaMikdash. My parochet de baveh. And what parochet was there? There was the parochet of the gates. In other words, what it means was that yes, there were doors, but in front of the doors was a parochet, like the way that we have or behind the doors or whatever, like the way that we have the Aron Kodesh today, that we have doors and we also have a parochet. You have both. So when it says that there wasn't a parochet in the first Beit HaMikdash, it doesn't mean there was no parochet. There was a parochet. It's just that there was also a door. There was also doors. Okay?
Overseas, they had door and curtains.
There were doors and curtains, yeah. So there was door and a curtain. Because Rabbi Zera said, Amar Rav in the name of Rav. There were 13 parochot, 13 curtains in the Mikdash. Shiv'a keneged shiva sharim. There were 7 according that corresponded to the 7 gates. Shetayim achat l'pitcho shel hechal ve'achat l'pitcho shel ulam. There was one that was at the door of the hechal and one that was at the door of the ulam, which is the antechamber in front of the hechal. Shetayim badivir u'shtayim kenegdan. There were 2 in between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and 2 ba'aliyah, above, because there was an area above the Kodesh HaKodeshim. There was an attic there where the workmen would come if they had to do work on the Kodesh HaKodeshim and so on. So what's the point though? This is talking about the second Beit HaMikdash, but the point of the Gemara in bringing it is to show you that even where you had doors, like at the gates of the Beit HaMikdash, there was still a curtain. So too, there was still a curtain in the second Beit HaMikdash. So what did they, in the first Beit HaMikdash rather? They had doors, but they also had a curtain. So that meant that they would open the doors and they would lift back the curtain and let them look at the Aron. That's what it means. But then the Gemara says, but Rav Achar bar Yaakov, Amar Rav Achar bar Yaakov says, we could understand it differently. Le'olam b'mikdash sheni. Maybe it's really talking about the second Beit HaMikdash, not the first. And his answer can resolve a lot of the questions that came before. Because he'll say this, Uchruvim tetzurata v'kaimeh. We're not talking about the Keruvim on the Aron. The Keruvim on the Aron that they didn't have in the second Beit HaMikdash, because they didn't have the Aron. But what they did have was the walls had the carving of Keruvim into the walls. Because we know that there was all kinds of artwork that, for example, Shlomo HaMelech put into the sides of the Kodesh, put into the, all kinds of designs that were inlaid with gold. As we learned, as it says, Ve'kol kirot habayit mesav kela. So it says that all of the sides of the house, all around, kala. Ve'kol kirot habayit mesav kala. That all around the sides of the Beit HaMikdash were designs, and it goes on to say, kiruvim v'timorot p'torei tzitzim. That there were kiruvim. There were the pictures of the angels, timorot, these are palm trees or date trees, and blooming flowers. And it says that they overlaid them with gold. In other words, they engraved these designs and then they put gold so that where the design was bolet, wherever the design protruded was 3D, so that the gold also protruded. And whenever the design was engraved, the gold went in. Okay, so the point is that it was overlaid with gold, so that the gold was around the design, and this shows you that there were also keruvim then on the walls. Okay, and the Bach shows that the way the Gemara quotes the pasuk here is not exactly right. There are actually two different pasukim. If you look in the Torah or Hashalem, it shows you that there are actually two different pasukim that are being blended together here. Okay, but the point is, the more important point is that there were keruvim to be seen on the walls of the Kodesh. So yes, they rolled back the parochet, and you could see that on the walls of the Kodesh were all kinds of engravings of the keruvim and other things with gold embedded in them or overlaying them. Uchtiv, and it also says that kema'ar ish veloyot saviv. There was kema'ar ish veloyot all around. What is kema'ar ish veloyot? What is this a reference to? Amar Rabba bar Rav Shela said, and we turn to Amud Bet, that means ki'ish ha'me'ura belevaya shelo. It means like a person who's me'ureh, who is connected, okay, who is embedded belevaya shelo with his companion. Rashi says, "Hanidbak v'havuk beishto ben zra'otav." He's connected, he's stuck and hugging his wife between his arms. In other words, the embrace. So now this makes sense, because what did we say before? That they showed them the keruvim and said, look at how they love each other. The keruvim are hugging each other. That's the love that Hashem has for you. Right? So the keruvim, not only the keruvim on the Aron look at each other, but the keruvim on the walls were like a man hugging his wife. So in other words, they would see this hugging and they would see the love that Hashem had for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they saw the top of the Aron. They didn't see the kaporet. They saw the keruvim on the walls. Okay, Rish Lakish says, when the non-Jews got into the Hechal, they came into the Beit HaMikdash. Ra'u keruvim ha'me'orin ze bazeh. They saw the keruvim hugging each other. Hotzian nashuk va'amru Yisrael alalu shebirchatan beracha. That these Jews, they took out, in other words, they took out the keruvim into the, they removed it. Rashi says, kipelum min hakotel. They took them off the wall. They took these designs, they detached them from the wall, and they said, look, these Jews, that their blessing is a blessing, v'kilalatan kelala, and their curse is a curse. Yasku b'dvarim halalu. This is their religion. They have these angels hugging each other, male and female hugging each other. This is the religion that they're supposedly so holy, that their blessing is a blessing and their curse is a curse. You think they're so great? Look at the things that they're dealing with. Miyad zilum, and they immediately made fun of them and degraded them. Shene'emar kol mechabedeh hizilua kira'u irvata. That all those who once honored her disgraced her, denigrated her because they saw her nakedness. This is from Echa also. In other words, they used to hold the Jews up on such a pedestal. Oh, they're so holy, but look, inside their kodesh is the man man and woman hugging each other, which is very base. It's not what you would expect from holy people. And therefore, because now they were denigrating them, they saw it in a negative light, when really it was supposed to show the closeness of the divine presence and the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. They interpreted it in a lecherous, negative way to put the Jews down. And the Evan Shetiyah. Why was it called Shetiyah? Dana shebimena hushtat ha'olam. That from this stone the world was built. In other words, it is the foundation stone. That's why it's called the foundation stone. Tanan. We learned in Tanan, Keman de Amar Mitzion Nivra Olam. This Mishnah supports the view that Zion, Jerusalem, was the beginning of the world. In other words, when Hashem began to create the world, the first place it was created was Jerusalem. That's why the foundation stone, Even Hashetiyah, is the foundation stone of the world. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brayta, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Olam me'emtza'ito nivra. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the world was created from the center. Shene'emar, as it says in the pasuk, betzeket afar lamutzak urgavim yedubaku. It says that in pouring out dust lamutzak to make a piece, uragavim yedubaku, and other pieces of mud attached to it. In other words, it's describing how did Hashem make the world. Rashi explains, mutzak echad hayalo. He started with one piece, one foundation piece. That's why it says he poured out the dirt, the dust, lemutzak, for that centerpiece, and then uragavim yedubaku, and then the other pieces of mud, so to speak, were attached around the side. What does that mean? There was a center, and then the other pieces came together, the other clumps of earth came together to make the rest of the world. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, it was created from the sides. In other words, it was from, and Rashi says, Arba mutzakot hayolo. He had actually 4 key pieces that he brought together. Not that there was a center and then he built around the center, but there were 4 sides and he mushed them together. Shene Emar, as it says, because as he said to the snow, Heve Aretz, be the land, vegeshem matar, vegeshem mitrot uzo, and the rainwater and the rain of the water of his power. So these words, Rashi says, Taseh Eretz. So what is it? He said to the snow, make the land. Umechan. And from where? Geshem matar vegeshem mitrot me'arbat tzidadin oridu. That the rain came down from all 4 sides. Ve'gshimo le'asot aretz. And this solidified everything into the land. Okay, so in other words, it came from all 4 sides. The rain came, and somehow the rain coming down from Shamayim caused everything to come together into one. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Even Yara Kadosh Baruch Hu Bayam, Mimenu Nishtat Ha'olam, that Hashem threw a rock into the ocean, so to speak, and it became the world. Shenemar, Alma Adaneh Hotba'u, Omi Yara Even Pinata. When Eov is being challenged, he's asked, do you know what the foundations of the world are set on? Adaneha are like the pieces on the bottom that hold up a structure. Okay, Omiyara Evan Pinata, or who threw down its foundation stone? Right, its original foundation stone. Do you know about that? So, in other words, the description is that the foundation stone was thrown down. Hashem threw down a rock, and everything built, sort of formed around that. Chachamim omrim mitzion nivra. The rabbis say no, it started from Jerusalem. So, not from center, building around a center, not 4 sides coming together, not a rock thrown into the ocean, but from Zion. Shne'emar mizmor la'asaf el Elohim Hashem. That's the beginning of the mizmor. Va'omer mitzion michlal yofi. That it says from Zion was michlal yofi, the totality of beauty. Mimenu michlal yofio shel olam. That from Zion was included all of the beauty of the world. So that's the last opinion. Tanya, it says in another bright, Rabbi Eliezer Agadol Omer, Rabbi Eliezer the Great said, that it says these are the offspring, so to speak, or that this is the development, this is the evolution, you could say, of the heavens and the earth when they were created on the day that Hashem made earth and sky. Okay, when He made the earth and the heavens. Toledot shamayim mishamayim nivrau, toledot haaretz me'eretz nivrau. So he says that the what came out of the heavens was made from the heavens, what came from the earth was made from the earth. In other words, there are 2 different systems here, 2 different substances. There's the heavenly and the earthly. The earthly produced the earthly, and the heavenly produced the heavenly. Okay? The Chachamim omrim, the rabbis say no, elo va'elo mitzion nivro. The Chachamim say no, everything came from Israel. Everything came from Jerusalem. Shene'emar mizmor la'asaf el Elohim Hashem. that this is again from the Mizmor Nun Aleph. That it's the whole psukim. I'll quote you from the side. It says, "Mizmor la'asaf el Elohim Hashem diber vayikra aretz." He spoke and he called the land mimizrach shemesh ad mivo'o, from the rising of the sun until its setting. In other words, he created the world. And then the pasuk. I'm sorry. This is Tehillim Nun. So pasuk, that's pasuk Aleph. Pasuk Bet is mitzion mechlal yofi Elohim hofia. From Zion, the ultimate of beauty, Hashem appeared. So it's connecting the creation. In other words, the first pasuk of Tehillim Nun describes Hashem creating the world. And then the second pasuk describes Hashem appearing mitzion. So what does it mean? Why are the two things connected? So Mizmor la'asaf Elohim Hashem diber vayikra aretz mimizrach shemesh ad mivo'o ve'omer, and the next pasuk says mitzion mechlal yofi Elohim hofia, that from Tzion, the absolute in beauty, Hashem appeared. Mimeno muchlal yofio shel olam. It was from Tzion that the entirety of the beauty of creation came. So you could interpret this in a more metaphoric, spiritual way. That what's really the concept here? That the Chachamim are saying, Rabbi Eliezer is looking at it from a physics perspective. He says, listen, there's the heavenly bodies and their development, and we can look at that. We can look at the earth and its development and creation. These are two different phenomena. But the rabbis say, no, mitzion means everything has a spiritual foundation. Everything emerges ultimately from the spiritual. So whether it's the heavens or the earth, everything came from Tzion. Tzion means the recognition of Hashem, the place where people come to acknowledge God, the spiritual center of the world. That's really the foundation of everything. So rather than try to determine how God created the world, they're trying to give a theological message. They're saying the message that at the end of the day, the foundation of everything is Yerushalayim. We don't have to look at that as a theory of physics, but it's a spiritual theory that's saying that everything boils down ultimately to the spirituality.